Good evening, everybody. We'd like to welcome you to Propolis from the Hive to the Bottle with Janet Clayton. And Janet, if you'd like to, go ahead and share your screen and take over.
You see me now?
I can see you.
All right.
And oh, just one quick note, housekeeping purposes. Folks, if you want to ask questions as she goes along, please type them to everyone in the chat box, and I will be sure to relay your question to Janet. All right, Janet, go ahead.
All right. So Propolis, it's better known to beekeepers as the bee glue. So it glues, the bees use it to glue everything together in the hive. It's a very resinous, sticky substance. Any space that's less than bee space, hopefully you all know what bee space is. So bee space is the ideal gap in the hive for bees to pass through, which is 3/8 of an inch. So anything less than 3/8 of an inch that the bees want to close up, they usually fill it with propolis. And if it's less than or greater than 3/8 of an inch, then they usually fill it up with beeswax. And so this is propolis. The color of it can vary. The coloration varies based on botanical source, just like your honey. You have as many different flavors and colors of honey as you have flowers that the bees work. And so propolis is the same way. So the colors can vary depending on what source that they've collected it from. But it's most commonly this dark brown or a mahogany red color. Like I said, it's very sticky. And that's if temperatures are greater than 68 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's less than 68, then it becomes hard and brittle. If you've ever had the chance to dig into a bee colony in a tree, typically they use propolis to coat the whole inside of the cavity. If I run my mouse here, can you all see my mouse? Louisa, can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay, so see this dark area right here and this darker area here? That's all propolis. And so the inside of the colony on back into the colony would be completely coated with that. They're finding now that it's the antibiotic of the beehive. And so it's actually a good substance to have. And the recent studies have shown the importance in maintaining good health in the hive. So you can see here that there's a lot of claims that are made about health benefits of propolis. You really need to be careful, though, if you're putting some of these claims on your labels. I would try and refrain from that. So unless there's an actual study that can truly claim that, try and stay away from that, because somebody may call you out on it. And unless I don't know if FDA regulates it or not, but you really just don't want to make health claims about your product. So here's a more simpler label: packed with vitamins, antifungal, antiseptic, immune booster, natural antibiotic. So here you can see all around the edges of this inner cover, this substance right here is where I pulled the outer cover off, and so it was warm and the propolis stuck up like glue. Like I say, they use it to seal everything up. Some hives or some strains of bees, some genetic variations in the bees are more prone to building a lot of propolis. So you may have some colonies that have tons of propolis. You may have some other colonies that has very little, and it is genetic driven. Most strains today, or at least in the not too distant past were developed selecting for less propolis tendencies, because it's not fun to work a hive that is really glued together, that you have to take the hive tool to every frame to pull it out of the hive and just really pry it. But in contrast, it's actually a good thing, because that's more antibiotic in the hive, and probably as a healthier colony, because it does have propolis. So I haven't heard in recent years whether they're actually trying to breed that back into bees, but I see it as a good thing. So like I mentioned, any holes that are less than the 3/8 of an inch, they're going to get filled with propolis. So this is just a close-up here, the top picture of where they had along that inner cover. And then this one is where they were filling up a hole alongside. I've actually seen them encase hive beetles in this, in propolis. There was a picture a few years ago going around that actually had a mouse, I think, encased in a dead mouse, that is, encased in propolis. So most of us see a lot of propolis between our frames. And so it's these that you end up scraping off during your winter cleaning. You're trying to scrape it off with a hive tool. If you wait till cooler temperatures, it's more brittle, and you can collect it into a bucket. Between your frames, between the boxes, under the hive rests. I think most of you have seen, if you've worked your hives at all, you see a lot of propolis. But you can see here, and we'll talk about it later, there's pieces of wood, there's bee wings, here's a piece of grass. Don't be too concerned. Here's even a wax moth cocoon. You don't have to be real concerned about it, because you're going to be taking care of that here in a little bit. You can also use a trap, and this is a plastic trap, and you put it on instead of your inner cover. And so if the bees don't like that space, they're going to fill up all those little gaps with propolis. I actually saw online one time that there was a video of this guy trying to clean his trap with a hive tool. Don't do that. That's one sticky, gooey mess. What you want to do is take this, I'll back up the picture here. They say it's the size of your hive, and it fits right nicely into a garbage bag. So you put that trap in a garbage bag, put it in your freezer, and let it get cold. You take it out, and then you bang it, and it cracks, and all those little chunks fall out into your garbage bag. Then you have nice, clean propolis. So if you're going to sell raw propolis, what I suggest is using one of these traps. Or like Louisa was telling me when we were setting this up, she gets a lot of propolis in her screens that she uses in her hive. It's the same principle, is because I've run inner screens or screen tops, inner covers, and if they don't like all of that air, they're going to fill those screens up with propolis. So it's the same principle. Put that in the freezer, let it get good and cold, take it out, bang it, and all those little pieces are going to fall out. So if you use a trap or something similar to that, like the screens, then you're going to have much cleaner product if you want to sell just raw propolis. So let's look at making a tincture. What is a tincture? So a tincture is an extract of plant or animal material dissolved in ethanol or ethyl alcohol. So the solvent concentrations of 25 to 60% are common, but you can have one as high as 90%. In herbal medicine, alcoholic tinctures are made with various ethanol concentrations, 20% being about the most common. And I think the recipe that I'm going to give you here in a little bit also probably runs about 20%. So you want to be careful. You know, you notice I said ethyl alcohol here. You can actually use isopropyl alcohol, but if you do, then it's only for external use. So if you're going to use internal use, then it needs to be the ethanol and not isopropyl. Isopropyl's only for external use, and you got to be really careful about that. So let's make a tincture. So here I've got my hive scrapings. Reach down into my bucket and just getting handfuls. My jar is sitting on a scale, and I'm going to put in 200 grams of scrapings of my propolis. Now I've got my grain alcohol, and you'll see here it says 75.5% alcohol by volume. So this is ethanol. And like I say, save that bottle because we're going to come back to it. So you're going to add your bottle of grain alcohol, and like I say, at least 70%, and make sure it's ethanol. And if not isopropyl, make sure it's everything's read as external use only. Got the hint? We want to be sure we're safe in telling folks what they want. Like I say, hold on to that bottle because we're going to use it again here in a little bit later. So you're going to pour the whole bottle, the whole fifth, into a jar that has your 200 grams of propolis, or propolis scrapings, I should say. Or you can use it from the trap, which would be more pure propolis. You're going to cap it and shake it. Put it in a cupboard, dark. You want it somewhere dark. You're going to shake it 2 or 3 times a day. You're going to pull it out, put it back in the cupboard, pull it out, shake it again and again. And after about 2 weeks, it's ready. So on the left is, you can see the alcohol is just a faintly tinted brown. And then on the right is where it has been, the alcohol has been dissolving the propolis out of all the other material that you scraped into there. So Louisa, when you were talking about your hive tool, did the liquid look like what's on the right?
No, not quite. Not quite. Plus I used isopropyl.
Well, you can make that for like mercurochrome, putting on wounds. So okay. It's still good product. Just use it for, but it needs to be, make sure that anything you use it for is external use only. Okay.
It's a little darker than the left, but not as dark as the right. So
okay. Yeah, I would add more propolis to it and let it steep longer. So like I say, you have to shake it, store it, shake it. So after 2 weeks, you can take it out, and I do a coarse filter. You can do it all at once if you want, but it's going to take forever because you've got a lot of fine particles in there as well. Because those scrapings, they consist of the pieces of wood, mixture of bee saliva, beeswax, sap from the tree buds, and the alcohol dissolves out the propolis, leaving behind the rest. So you want to coarse filter that out. Here's a little bit closer look at what you're filtering out. Don't forget propolis stains. So you're going to spill, you're going to drip, whatever. You want to lay newspaper down or something that you don't care about getting stained, because propolis will stain. If you worked bees and you've carried beehives around, probably most of you have a propolis line across your belly somewhere on whatever you're wearing when you're working your bees, where the propolis stains that bee suit or shirt or whatever you're wearing. So then you're going to want to fine filter the rest of the material. So after you filtered out the coarse stuff, you're going to refilter the liquid that went through, and this is where it can take forever to do it. My last filter, I usually run through a coffee filter. So I typically put the filter, get one of the big filters and put in that screen that I used before, and filter through that, but I needed a picture really quick, so you got this one, sorry. So here's where you're going to use your jar again. So now I put that liquid back in the jar, the bottle. So then you're going to place this in the fridge for a week, and it's going to continue to settle out. So you can see down here on the bottom where we're starting to get a two-tone color. So this is more fine particulate that actually filtered through that coffee filter that is settling out from the rest of the liquid. And the longer it sits in the fridge, the more that it's going to continue to settle out. So here's a little closer up look of that. And like I say, it's going to settle out. So when you're going to pour this into your bottle, then you're only going to decant or take off from the top. And this is why I like to go ahead and put it back into your alcohol bottle, because it's easier to decant, pour off the top, and not get all of this sludge mixed up into your liquid. So, you know, you've poured a few bottles and this is starting to get mixed up. Just put it back in the fridge and let it settle. You know, I've got a fifth in my refrigerator now. You know, our Forest Festival got canceled and I haven't had to make any more propolis for a while, and so I've got my tincture sitting in the refrigerator still in a fifth in alcohol bottle. So what do you want to put it in? Well, this is a dropper bottle. Make sure it's brown, because the ultraviolet light can actually break down the components in the propolis tincture. Like I say, you want to be careful not to pour in the last dregs from your bottle. It's settled out. You can actually refilter this. If you're going to, you know, make another batch, just pour it in top of this if you want. And so you'll end up continually decanting off the top and the dregs sitting in the bottom. But if you get a fair amount, I would say just refilter it and see what you get out of it. So label. Same as honey. What is it? Who are you? The ingredients are, again, it's typical of any product, is number one. Hang on one second. Sorry. Sorry about that. I don't know how you muted landline. So you want to have the ingredients listed by what's most prevalent in there. So definitely by volume, I've got more grain alcohol than I have propolis. So my ingredients are grain alcohol and propolis. And unlike honey, which is sold by weight, then propolis tincture is a liquid, and this is a liquid ounce, not a weight ounce. So you can see it says milliliters rather than grams is the second. So let's look at salve. Salve is a medical ointment used to soothe the surface of the body. So here, Louisa, you got your isopropyl. You can use it to make a salve because that's going to be external. Anything that soothes, mollifies, or relieves is a salve. So again, you want to be careful about making the medical claims on any labeling. So before you get started, you want to get your dark container ready before you mix up your stuff, because once you start mixing up your salve, the temperature and as the temperature changes, then it becomes more solid and then becomes more difficult to work with. I see, will blue bottles suffice? I'm not sure what the blue you'd have to do some research to see if blue will actually break the ultraviolet light. I would say if it's a really dark blue, it would probably be okay, but I wouldn't know. I'm not sure, so I would want to do some searching on that. So I took my tincture now, and rather than decanting the liquid into the little bottles for the dropper bottles, I put it in a jar. And the reason you want to put it in a jar is because then I'll make a double boiler system out of it. So what you're going to do is you're going to heat it to drive off the alcohol, reducing or concentrating the tincture into a thick goo. And I mean thick goo. So I have at times gone off and forgot to put the cap back on my jar, and it's gotten really hard. Just add a little bit of alcohol back into it, and you can eventually get it mixed back up into a malleable state. So it's not bad. And even if you put a cap on it, if it sits for in a really long time, it will still get hard. And like I say, just add a little bit more alcohol back into it and work it around, and you'll get it mixed back up. So to make a salve, my recipe calls for 20 parts of petroleum jelly and 1 part propolis. And so I usually, it could be 20 grams to 1 gram when they're talking 20 to 1. So I make an artificial petroleum jelly using mineral oil and beeswax. And so I guess you could use real petroleum jelly if you wanted. I assume some of you may not want to go to this route to make your own petroleum jelly. Or if you have some other, I don't know, maybe even you want to mix it into a hand cream. Depends on whether you want to sell it or whether you're just making it for your own use. Again, I use a double boiler system. Remember, beeswax is highly flammable, so anytime I'm melting beeswax, I use a double boiler system. You can see I call my petroleum jelly Beezoline. That's my artificial petroleum jellies. It's beeswax and mineral oil. And so I get that liquefied, and when you get it liquefied, you're going to pour it into a container. And so you can see here I have it on a scale. So I'm getting my 20 parts of petroleum jelly. So my liquefied petroleum jelly. Now, if you're not making the petroleum jelly and you're just using what's off the shelf, it may be of a consistency that you don't even need to heat it up. So you can see my petroleum jelly just looks like melted beeswax. You don't want to add the propolis too quick, because if you do, it really won't mix well. You can see all these little specks in here. It looks like dirt. That's not actually dirt. It is little globules of the propolis that doesn't mix in well when it's too liquid. Stand by on your mineral oil and beeswax. You'll see the recipe here in a short minute. So once it does cool down enough, you can see here it's probably about the consistency of warm peanut butter, but it's still malleable. You add in your 1 part of your goo, your propolis goo. So again, you have 20 parts of the petroleum jelly and 1 part of the goo. And so like I say, it could be 20 grams to 1 gram. You want that ratio. You want to get it mixed up before it solidifies, or you'll end up with chunks of wax in the salve or the petroleum jelly. So it'll start to solidify. And so you'll have a nice brown substance, but if you work into it, it'll have these little clumps that where the wax melted or solidified before the whole mixture got mixed up. And so this is what you'll, yeah.
We've got a couple questions. Someone wanted to know if blue bottles would suffice, and what is the ratio of mineral oil to beeswax?
You weren't paying attention, my dear.
Not me. It wasn't my question.
No, I thought I already answered them. Did everybody not hear?
You may have answered it after the question come through, actually.
Yeah, I was watching them, so I tried to
mineral.
answer.
Yeah.
Somebody in chat, let me know if you got them. Got the answers? Blue, I wasn't sure about. I said the darker the okay. You said I did answer. Thank you, Mike, John. Blue, right. Make sure I would search some more online to be sure, but the darker is probably the better. Need to make sure it's ultraviolet, and stand by on the my petroleum jelly recipes coming up here a little bit. Okay, and so get it all mixed up, and before it gets too hard, I've gone through different ways of doing this. So one way is to actually spoon, excuse me, is to actually spoon the salve into the bottles, and that's better if it's still somewhat liquid. And the other is I've just taken a knife, and where it was a little bit more solid, you could take the knife and just kind of fill it that way. But with the knife, you need to make sure that you keep pressing down in the corners so you actually get a jar full of the salve. And so here's my product. Like say the spooning you want to do before it cools too much. A helpful hint. So before you go put your labels on, whether it's on the tincture, whether it's on the salve, or you're doing hand creams or lip balms, make sure you use some kind of solvent to wipe your containers with, because I don't care what you do, just like when you're working in the honey house, everything gets sticky, right? So your jars are going to have a little bit of oil feel to them, even if you don't think there is. Most likely there is, so your labels won't stick really well. One thing you need to make sure of is test what you're using, because this goof off is a little bit strong and will actually make more of the outside of the container more of a buff, because it actually reacts with the plastic. But you want some kind of solvent that you can kind of wipe down your jars with before you try and label it. Same labeling standards, except Propolis salve is based on weight. So what is it? Who are you? Where can they find you? What's the weight? And then the ingredients is, again, by weight, what is in there. So we have mineral oil as the first ingredient, beeswax. Of course, that's my petroleum jelly there. And then Propolis is the last. So where did I get my recipes from? I had this book before the web became so prevalent. Now just Google all you want. There's tons and tons and tons of recipes online. But I started with this book, Super Formulas, has all kinds of recipes in it. But what you want to do is experiment. Figure out what works for you. You may not want that recipe exactly the same. You might want to, figure out what works best for you. What do your customers like? What do you like? I make stuff, I do sell it, but I make stuff that I use. And so that's, if my sister didn't use the hand cream, I may not make so much hand cream, but I use this salve and tincture. I work on a farm, I get cuts all the time. I'm working in dirty water. This Propolis salve is great. You get cracks in your hands in the wintertime, and hand creams don't just cut it. This salve works pretty good. Propolis is a really good stuff. Somebody wrote comments, yes, goof off works good on my honey and maple jars. So I like to say, just be careful. It does react with the plastic. So here's the recipe for the petroleum jelly. You see it's just 1 ounce of beeswax to a half a cup of baby or mineral oil. Here's your another helpful hint. Convert all your liquid measurements into weights. So I can put my container that I'm going to melt my stuff in, I can put that on the scale. I can add in the 2 tablespoons. So I think that was a thing for beeswax in another recipe said 2 tablespoons. Well, that's 0.9 ounces. You know, your half a cup of oil, that's 3.5 ounces. So I measure it out, measured it, and then weighed it. And so I can just put my big container on the scale and I might dump in 3 cups of mineral oil and then just add enough wax by weight to match that in the recipe. So converting everything to weights, it eliminates all the mess of pouring mineral oil into a measuring cup and then pouring that in. And now you have a dripping oiled measuring cup sitting around. Just doing it by weights makes things so much nicer and neater. And with that, I will take any questions. I'm not seeing anybody pop up with questions. We got a quiet group tonight.
We'll give them a few minutes. Can you use other oils? I guess I get the advantage because I'm not muted, but other oils like, say, coconut oil instead of the mineral?
I wouldn't see why you couldn't. It would be basically, what are you going to be using it for?
Mm-hmm. Well, like the one with your petroleum.
Yeah. Well, but I use the bezoline for a lot of different things. So
I see.
So it depends on what your end product is going to be. For the
Right.
salve, you know, you wouldn't want something that's going to, the thing with the tincture is if you use it on a cut, that it will burn. But if you put the salve on, because it doesn't have the alcohol in it, then it does not burn. Okay. So somebody asks here, does a salve smell? Oh, it has a wonderful smell of propolis. So I love beeswax odors. I love propolis smells. I mean, it's a natural smell.
You've got a couple questions before that one.
Okay, let me back up. How and why is this particular tincture used? Again, Google it. There's tons. I use it to put on wounds. Some people actually take a dropper of tincture a day. And if you're going to do that, put it in the back of your throat because it tastes like, oh, it's nasty tasting. But I have used it for sore throat. So I've had a really bad sore throat, and I take the dropper with the tincture and put right on the back of my throat, and it really helps. I've seen recipes where you can put, add a drop to your coffee or whatever, and I've never done that. Rossi Wilson told me one time, he says, don't ever put it in your coffee. It foams like crazy. But there's external and internal uses. They say you saw all the health benefits of propolis, and so you can use it for a lot of different things. But yeah, Google it. It's a wide ranging uses for it.
Normal dosage. John asked what.
So again, I've only taken a dropper at a time. Mine was mainly for sore throat. I don't take it otherwise, other than for external and then sore throat. Again, Google for different things.
Christian asked, can you remind them where the goo comes from? I'm assuming you mean propolis?
So the goo is made from the propolis tincture that is reduced. The alcohol is essentially burnt off, evaporated when I warm it to get a concentrated propolis goo. I mean, it's a really thick. You don't want, when it sets, you don't want alcohol to settle to the top, which it will if it's not evaporated enough. So another question is, will a queen excluder work as a propolis collector? Yeah. If the hive is really into filling cracks, and especially this time of year, as it starts to cool down, the bees really don't, really don't like that air in their hive, so they're starting to fill in. So if you have a queen excluder on top of your hive, they may start filling that in. The difference with the queen excluder and the trap is the queen excluder, the gaps are a little bit further apart, and they may not be as apt to fill that up. Now I have an inner cover that has the holes for the Boardman bee escape, or the porter bee escape, and I've put screens, the number 8 mesh screens on those, and the bees tend to fill those up really quick if they're not wanting that air in their hive. What in the world has that bee got in her pollen sacs? Those are not pollen sacs, that's the propolis. So that is bee sap or tree sap that the bee has gone out and collected. So just like in the hive, you have nectar collectors, you have pollen collectors, you have water collectors, you also have propolis collectors. So they've gone out and collected this from the tree buds. Where's a good place to buy bottles? Again, I usually go online. I have, let's see, Container and Packaging is in the name. But you can type in like 1 ounce dropper bottles, and you'll get a whole bunch of options.
Amazon.
What's that?
Amazon.
Amazon.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Have you ever made the tincture with an oil? No. So what I would do is make the tincture. So you're using the alcohol to extract the propolis from all the other things that are in there. So propolis itself, like if you, even on that clean one where you use the trap, that propolis is made up of propolis, beeswax, bee saliva. So you're using the alcohol to extract the true propolis out of the other stuff. So then if you wanted to put it in an oil, then one, you could either reduce that down to that goo state and then mix it back into the oil.
I think you got
the tincture.
a couple questions right before that as well. One from Carrie. Does the jelly mixture, go ahead.
Does the jelly mixture equal to the 20 ounces? Only if you mix it that way. I usually just make a big batch. And so I usually have extra jelly left over. So what you want to do is figure out what does, so you already know that a half cup of the oil is 3.5 ounces, right? And so that goes with a 1 ounce of beeswax. And so then you would need, you know, how many of those batches do you need to make up 20 ounces? Or you take whatever that weight is and make that the 20 and figure out what the 1 part is. So the 1 part would not be 1 ounce, it would be, you know, 1/20th of whatever the other weight is. the ratio needs to be 1:20. Are there issues with the salve staining? Yeah, it's got, I don't notice it when I'm using it on the skin, but I'm sure if you had it on cloth or clothes or something that it's going to stain because it has that propolis in it. I've never really noticed that there's enough propolis in it to stain my fingers. Now the tincture, yes. So if you, just like mercurochrome or methylate, if you put that on, your finger turns red, you know, you put the propolis tincture on, it's going to stain you. That's temporary.
Does the tincture or salve have a shelf life? And let's see, yeah, that was from Carrie.
So one thing I have noticed with the tincture, it depends on your bottles, they actually may evaporate a little bit out, which is then going to make the tincture stronger over time. I've had salve for a long time because I've had a big, you know, container of it. With using the mineral oil, I don't see an issue with it. Now I have made hand creams with olive oil, and that does have a shelf life because it's, you know, it's like a fat, and so, you know, it over time it kind of becomes rancid. But in this case, you're using alcohols and mineral oil, and so I've never really had an issue with that. So can propolis be infused into oil? So I think that kind of goes back to the other question I was talking about. Can you make tincture out of oil? And I kind of leaded towards using the propolis in tincture in the oil. So is it a lot of work for the bees to make extra propolis? I don't know. But you know, it takes, if they're not doing one job, they're doing another. So if you are creating space that you're trying to get the propolis out of, you're causing bees to increase their foraging numbers that go get propolis. Just like if you're taking pollen from your hive, then you're either causing more bees to go get pollen, or you're restricting the pollen in the hive, and then they're going to have less brood production. But I would say yes, if you are, everything has its price. And so, you know, how much do you want that propolis? Most of my propolis is all taken from scrapings. So the only time I really get it otherwise, if they happen to fill a screen, or they happen to fill a queen excluder or some other space. But mine is generally from scrapings. Are there any legal ramifications for selling alcohol tincture? I don't know. If there is, I don't want to hear it. I've never had anybody tell me otherwise. It's I don't know. Is there legal ramifications for selling cough syrup? I guess it's because you're not really selling it as an alcohol drink. So I'm not aware of any. You know, I've just tried to maintain the same labeling with, you know, what's in it, who's produced it, you know, the weight. Did we miss anything?
No, it looks like you got all the questions. And I just mentioned that really it seems like you don't need very much propolis to make these items.
No. It's 200 grams is a batch. That's a fair amount of scrapings. You know, it's that. Well, that jar that I had, let me go back to the beginning here. It's not going to let me do it this way. Uh-oh, I killed it all together.
Click it again.
So this is a 2-quart jar, to give you an idea. And it's probably close to half full, maybe a quarter to half full of propolis is that 200 grams.
Oh,
that's
a quart. Picture. That's basically a quart then.
Yeah.
That is quite a bit.
It's at least a pint. Yeah, all the pictures I got are at an angle. Well, here you go. So, yeah, it's probably about a pint because this is freshly poured. And that's a 2-quart jar. Any other questions?
After you extract the propolis, can you use the remains for anything else?
I wouldn't know what you would use it for. Fire starter. It's got mostly beeswax and any other dirt particles in it. But it's largely beeswax, and then of course it's got the alcohol, which is combustible. So I guess you might want to try and make some little fire starters out of it.
Okay. Somebody else, well, there was a couple other questions here.
Lost my chat window. I can't figure out how to get back.
Russ said, do people buy propolis if I don't want to make anything? And
yeah, so and that's where I was talking about if you want to sell raw propolis. So people actually buy propolis capsules. And so that's where if you're going to sell propolis, you would want to make sure that it's a pure form. So that's where you would probably want to go with the trapping, so that when you crack it out of the trap, it is a fairly pure propolis. You can also buy the capsules if you want to make your own capsules. So, but yeah, there are people who actually just take the propolis itself.
Carrie wants to know what you sell for, like per ounce, tincture, and salve. I think she's wanting to know price point.
The salve I sell for $5, and the tinctures I was selling a smaller bottle for $3, and I just went to a larger bottle and haven't figured out what I'm going to charge yet for those.
Any other questions?
I say Google online. There's all kinds of recipes for various things. There's going to be, they'll go more into the health benefits of the tinctures itself too. You'll get your dosages and various ways of taking it. Like I say, if you do take it, make sure that you put it to the back of your throat. It definitely tastes like crap. And of course, then you might end up with some more yellow teeth too if you don't get it in the back of your throat.
Pretty much your supplies, you have to use the same, like kitchen utensils and things. You just use the same one over and over because it stains it, I'm sure.
Yep.
Christian said that they paid $20 for a 1 ounce tincture on Amazon.
Whoa, come see me.
So, well, awesome. Mike Blessing said thank you. Good job. as many have. We certainly appreciate you putting on this workshop for us this evening, Janet. And
Well, COVID killed, this was the program I was going to present at our spring conference, which that was the first event to go by the wayside with the COVID stuff. So I was glad to provide it to the group. So
thank you very much. And if your chat box isn't up, there's lots of thank yous, great presentation. So much appreciated.
thank you.
All right. Well, everybody have a good evening, and please rejoin Wednesday evening for another session. Good night, everybody.